Hi, hello, and welcome to Charmed, a Power of Three podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy, and this is our first episode. So I'm gonna introduce myself, and I'm gonna say what this podcast is about, and we're gonna go from there. So Charmed is a show that started in 1998 and went on for 8 seasons. Then it went on for two comic books, and is still alive and well today. Um, I decided to just dedicate time to just talk about how much I love the show. We're going to talk about the episodes. We're going to talk about the books that came out, the comic books that came out. Hopefully, there's even more that we're going to be able to do. See, I'm 25. I started watching Charm probably when I was like 12. I think I was in high school when the show ended. I cried at the series finale. I think most of us did. Um, And then, yes, I did buy every single comic book that came out when it happened. So, anyway, with no further ado, we're going to start our first episode. So, with our first episode, of course, we are going to recap. We're going to do everything with the pilot episode. The episode that started it all. But first, I want to give you a little bit of context behind the series. So, Charmed was created by Constance M. Berg. She only stayed on the series, unfortunately, for about 2-3 years. She didn't finish out the third season, but she created it. It went through a lot of changes when the show was originally being under conception. It originally was just going to be 3 friends that lived in Boston, and then just throughout the creative process, we somehow ended up with 3 sisters in San Francisco. I don't think that you could get any different than how it went from point A to point B. So as most of us know, I think the pilot episode that aired was not actually the original pilot. There was a 30-minute pilot, which most shows do, to sell the show to the network. So with that episode, they shot the role of Phoebe under an actress named Lori Rom. However, when the show actually got picked up, Lori dropped out because she felt as though being a witch or being depicted as a witch wasn't going to either bode well with her family, her home life, or her church, or a combination of both. After that, they cast Alyssa Milano. But prior to that, they had Shannon Doherty and Holly Marie Combs. They actually almost didn't have any of that because Shannon... Sorry, just making sure no one's here. Shannon was given the role from Aaron Spelling because he worked with her on 90210. And she is best friends with Holly, and they were... Holly had to go through the casting process, and... sorry, I'm throwing a text just in case someone tries to interrupt this podcast. So when Holly auditioned, they actually told her that they didn't think that she brought the star quality that Shannon did. And Shannon and Aaron Spelling, who's one of the biggest producer of the 80s and 90s, told them that they would walk if Holly wasn't given the role. So Holly was then given the role, and then with Alyssa, we had our Charmed ones. So a little bit of the episode, it was called Something Wicca This Way Comes. It was written by Constance M. Berg, who, of course, created the series. It was directed by John T. Kretschmer, who I do believe directed a good amount of episodes throughout the entire series. And the original air date is October 7th, 1998. As we all know, it aired on the WB, which is now a defunct network. The pilot kind of just starts, it builds up a lot, and I know some people like to go back and they like to look at the plot holes and this and that. That's not the type of viewer that I am, because I know that when pilots are being recorded, they don't always know that a show is going to go past 13 episodes, past 22 episodes. They don't know if it's going to go past the season, past a pilot episode. So there's some things that either don't make sense or don't add up or kind of just get thrown in and then dropped. But that's okay. So, like, there are a couple things where Piper says they have an aunt. I don't really pay attention to that. It's little things that you got to kind of, like, give up because you, as the people that are producing the show, don't always know how far the show is going to go. I guarantee you they didn't think the show was going to go past 8 years. I guarantee you they didn't think the show was going to go past 3 when Shannon left. But they went 5 more years. Anyway, I digress. So, the show kind of starts with Piper coming home. She's trying to kind of literally playing the middle sister because she hasn't told Prue that Phoebe is coming back from New York, and Phoebe went to New York to see their father, who they haven't had any contact with for X amount of time. I think most of their childhood. That's established through the pilot, and that's continuous throughout the series. So Piper's literally playing the middle sister and the middleman and trying to make it so that they don't kill each other. There's some information given to us that Prue was engaged, and she was engaged to somebody named Roger, and Roger somehow Roger tried to sleep with Phoebe, but Prue didn't see it that way. So Prue is still working for Roger. Anyway, that's all kind of plot points that don't go much of anywhere after the pilot. So, unbeknownst to the sisters, there's a serial killer on the loose. He's literally killing witches for their powers. And the investigator, Andy, who is also from Prue's past, they went to high school together, 100% believes that these are witches. I love that. I think that that's actually kind of cool because it's something that I don't know if any other shows really had where someone on the outside of whatever it is, whether it's witches, vampires, demons, whatever, definitely believed it, but just never had proof. So Andy 100% believed it. He just didn't necessarily have proof. So he's convinced that these witches are getting murdered. He's trying to look into that. His partner, Daryl, is like, you gotta stop. You gotta calm down. We're gonna get, like, the freaky deaky vibe here. So, anyway, the sisters are playing with their spirit board, which we introduced the spirit board, which I really wish they'd used a lot more throughout the series. But, whatever. There's an inscription from their mom that says the power of 3 will always set them 3, and they're like, what the fuck does that mean? They're literally like, I don't, like, huh? So, power goes out. Phoebe goes upstairs because that spirit board also tells her to go to the attic, and Piper and Prue are like, fuck that, we are not going upstairs. That is like red flag after red flag after red flag, but Phoebe, being the youngest, is like, I mean, it's telling me to go up there, and we haven't been able to go up there in years because of their Grams, who has passed away, so you know what, let's go. Phoebe goes upstairs, somehow the attic unlocks, she finds the Book of Shadows and starts chanting, which she thought was just reading aloud, but, you know, to each their own. So, after that, Prue and Piper find her, and they're like, Phoebe doesn't realize that she's just now invoked their powers. They get their powers, but they don't know that they have them yet. Going on to the next day, each of them accidentally uses it, which I love that we kind of have individual scenes with the sisters and the way that they each kind of discovered their powers and how interesting that is, because first we get Prue, who's in an argument with Roger about some art exhibit, and when she gets angry and she gets emotional, her telekinetic powers are put in full force, and she accidentally chokes him, but she doesn't know it because she's walked out of the room. So she still has no idea. Piper, on the other hand, has an interview to be a chef at a restaurant that plays throughout the rest of the season, Quake, and when she kind of freaks out because Chef Moore is trying to taste her food before she's finished, she spazzes and freezes him. But she uses this completely to her advantage. She puts the wine on her food and gets the job. And then she walks out and is like, I'm fucking freaked out. And I don't know what to do. Which kind of goes along with Piper for most of the series. And then you got Phoebe, who is just riding along, gets a premonition that these guys on a rollerblades. These guys on rollerblades are gonna crash. They're gonna get hit by a car. Which I think this is probably the only time that Phoebe hasn't had to either touch something or be around something, and it just kind of comes to her. But I guess that's a plot point that's lost that I shouldn't nitpick on, or that's just her way of realizing that she has her powers. So she has a premonition. She gets into an accident trying to save them. Prue has to come pick her up, which is where we get the plot point that Prue and Andy are crossed lovers. There's some tension there. It's kind of like the first love story on the show. So Prue picks Phoebe up, is taking her. They end up at a pharmacy to get her drugs, where Phoebe starts poking at her. She is literally poking the bear to try to get Prue to use her powers, even though Prue still doesn't think that she has them. And when she starts bringing up their dad, bringing up Roger, I think it's a really good scene and funny and dramatic at the same time when everything comes crashing in the aisle that they're in because of how angry Prue gets. It just like all comes out of her head. So then they go to a bar to, I guess, talk about what just happened. That is kind of weird, but whatever. Again, a pilot, not gonna nitpick. It's fine. So they kind of, Phoebe and Prue very much accept what's going on and what's happening, where Piper is out on a date with her boyfriend Jeremy, who she doesn't know is a serial killer. Granted, I guess we kind of don't know. It wasn't really a surprise, I guess, because I've seen the pilot so many times. But it definitely, I guess, kind of came out of left field. It was a good plot twist for 1998. I'll give him that. It was a good plot twist. So he admits that he's been killing all those women, all those witches, and he's like, I'm taking your powers because I knew the entire time Grams was a witch and you guys are witches and I want all your powers. So Piper's able to freeze him. She, I think, is able to control things with her powers quickest, I think. I think Prue got it pretty quick, but Piper very easily got a good amount of control on her freezing power the quickest, which I think is pretty cool. So she freezes him, she gets away, but also has to hit him with a 2x4, which I think is badass. I wonder why, I guess, Piper was kind of the pacifist through a lot of the series up until a certain point. I think it's kind of cool. I kind of like watching the fight scenes. Let's just, the badass sisters just fighting demons and kicking ass is just, there's nothing like it. So anyway, we're gonna continue. So she gets away, she gets home, she's like, oh my god, guys, what do we do? Pretty sure Jeremy's a warlock or a demon or whatever. I actually don't think that they use the word demon throughout most of the first season, maybe until midway through, because they had finally figured out the mojo of the show, and maybe they had, because they'd gotten picked up for more episodes, they were able to mold where they were going with it. So I think just with this, they said warlock. So they go to the Book of Shadows, they're trying to say a spell, the spell doesn't work, and they run back downstairs because Phoebe has another premonition. That it didn't work, that Jeremy is still alive, and he's now got these thorns out of him. That was, first of all, while that was great special effects and great makeup, that was disgusting. I don't know where we went. I guess the thorns came from the rose that was put into the, not doll, whatever it's called. I want to say bonnet, but I know that that's the wrong term for it. Someone correct me. But I guess that's where the thorns came from. It's literally like the rose thorns are coming through him. So he comes back and he's all jacked up. Like he's messed up. And Prue starts using her power. So I guess Prue and Piper kind of got used to their powers very quickly. So Prue's fighting them off, but really she doesn't know how to use them. She doesn't have much control, so she runs back upstairs, and they're trying to block him out, but he has God knows how many witches' powers at this point, so he's able to get in. Which we're going to roll back to the spirit board because they were able to use the Power of 3 spell, which is the easiest but best spell that is used throughout the series, because it kind of, I don't want to say it gets them out of trouble anytime that they need it, but like when they're really in that much of a bind, that's the spell that they can use to have all their powers together. Sorry, I'm just going to take a sip of my drink. I guess I could really start an ASMR podcast with this stuff, but I'm not going to, because Charmed is way more interesting to talk about. Okay, so I guess I can talk we can go into a little bit of like the random tidbits about like shooting of the pilot episode. So the guy who actually played Jeremy Burns, Eric Scott Woods, didn't want to say the word bitch, or he didn't want to call, maybe he didn't want to call them bitches. He didn't, his prerogative. So they had to use someone else's voice to say bitch, which I think turned into his demonic voice when he was going crazy and getting vanquished. So they used that, which I guess is pretty cool, because I don't think I knew that when I first originally watched the episode. I had to go, I was just randomly looking stuff up, and I found it. Oh, a little bit of information we get is a little bit about Melinda Warren, who comes up in the season, and then that's very well established, and I like that they kind of stuck with that. I don't want to say mythology because it's not the right word. They stuck with that lineage. You got Melinda Warren, who was burned at the stake, and she vowed that she would have 3 descendants, 3 sisters that would have the power to move time, to freeze time, move objects with their mind, and to see the future. And that's the prophecy that happens, and the charmed ones are born. I like that. I think that that's played very well throughout the entire series. I'm glad that that's kind of not messed with. Let's see, a couple of other like random tidbits about the pilot episode. So Shannon was actually sick when they were shooting the pilot, which again, I didn't really know it until I was just randomly looking up information. So she was sick, and I guess it is kind of true. If you look back and look at her, she's very pale, and she doesn't look sick, but she just looks really pale. And then after that, she kind of gets like her Shannon glow, which I thought was actually pretty interesting. Excuse me. I had to have a little bit of a drinky drink. So the pilot was actually the most watched pilot that the WB ever had. I don't think that they ever had any other pilot episode go above that, because at that point the WB had started to decline, and viewership just as a whole for the entire network had gone down, kind of like how the CW is now going down. I guess that didn't work out too well. Oh my god, can we all talk about the theme song real quick? Let's just say that's the best theme song to have for this show, and I was really upset when the 8th season came out on DVD and it had been removed. I absolutely hate that whatever musical like number that they put in there to try to make up for the how Soon Is Now not being in there, but it didn't work. So I'm really glad that when they released it on DVD and released it on Blu-ray, which I have both, I didn't really need to spend the $35 on every single season on Blu-ray, but I did. I'm glad that got restored for all of them except for the 8th season, which makes me a little sad. Sorry, random moment of silence. This is my first episode. This is the first time I'm doing this, so I'm really hoping that as it goes on, I kind of get more into the groove of things. I'm going to refer to my notes real quick. Pause for deliberation. I really hope you guys are okay. Let's look at my notes real quick. can we talk about the house? Yes, I knew that's exactly what I wanted to talk about. So the original pilot episode was actually filmed in the actual Hollowell, quote unquote, manor that's in Los Angeles. So they filmed that. They filmed that 30-minute spot. The attic wasn't filmed in it though, because I think it was actually sealed off. So they filmed it, then they built the set, and then the Lord Rob dropped out. They got Alyssa, yada yada yada. So we went all over that a couple minutes ago. So we all agree that we love that house. We all wanted that house to be our house when we were growing up. It's if you've looked at videos on YouTube, the actual house's setup is very odd, I guess, because it literally is from the Victorian era. It definitely not functional. I'm not gonna lie, I would love to have the house built as it's shown in the show, and have the exterior and everything, because I think that'd be so cool. But we all wanted that house. It was a great house. I think it's funny that in a lot of the episodes, it's referenced that the sisters must either make a lot of money or something, because they have this really big Victorian house in the middle of San Francisco, and they're like, "Nah, fam, we just fight demons for a living. We actually don't know how the bills are paid, so we're like, because I have to call out of work every 3 days to save the world, and you just don't know it." But yeah, I loved that house. I don't think I want to ever live in the actual house though, because I feel bad for the people that live there and how often the fans must show up either taking pictures or show up and want a tour. I would charge money, 100%. Like, make that money. Not even saying you gotta charge a lot. $10. $10, take a tour. Do you need to imagine if the 7 million people every year that watch the pilot episode wanted to just tour your house, and it was 7 million people for the entire year? How much money that would be? $10 a person? Like, that's a money-making scheme right there. But, so, I think Charmed had a pretty solid podcast. It had a pretty solid pilot. Wow, okay. We can see where my brain is. It's also the highest rated episode of the entire series. Which honestly happens to most shows. They really don't tend to trend up and then down. There are a few exceptions in the 2000s where that was happening. But it's the highest rated episode throughout the entire series. And it was a pretty solid pilot. There are not a lot of holes that happen. I think it's a little bit of like the family stuff that was going on that we kind of nitpick, because we're like, no, that's not how it works. But we need to not nitpick them. Solid pilot. It really, I think, hooked a lot of us in, so that we kept coming back. So I think that's probably the end of our first episode of The Power of Three, a Charmed podcast. Or Charmed, a Power of Three podcast. Wow. I really hope you guys return, because I am very much like this in real life, and I don't know where I was going with that thought, but okay. Anyway, so thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I hope that we can continue making episodes and continue on. Hopefully, once we get into the groove of things, maybe we can set up some segments. Maybe I can have some questions, maybe some people to join me to record an episode together. But I'm really glad that we can sit here and talk for like half an hour about our love for this show. Until next time, I will see you guys later. And as everyone always says throughout most of the show, throughout the series, I think after the whole Melinda thing, Melinda Warren came to visit them. Blessed be. Goodbye, guys.